Hello and welcome to episode 9 in the series. We're finally at the point now where we can start to generate IL code directly from our compiler. To help us do this, we're going to use a third-party library called Cecil. So this library allows you to do a couple of things. You can either analyse and modify existing programs, or as in our case, you can use it to create brand new .NET programs. So because this is going to be quite a complicated episode, I've decided to divide it up into 4 sections. We'll look at how you import types and methods. So a type would be something like system.console, and a method would be like write line or read key, which are both things that we're going to be able to call, or we need to be able to call from our IL code. Well, then we'll look at how you create a basic application itself and set up a module and the namespaces and the actual console application. We'll then do the IL instructions that come from our program. So this stage is going to be reasonably straightforward because we can generate a C# program at the moment, and we can look at that in IL Spy, and that will tell us which instructions we need to create. And then finally we need to handle loops because they're slightly more complicated because you have to do them in 2 passes for your code. So let's begin by looking at types and methods. So just going back to our code from last time. So the last thing we did is we lowered our code. So that means you're removing some higher level functions from your language. So in our case, we're removing the while loops and replacing them with gotos and labels. So now we've got our lowered code. So we've only had one block. We no longer have nested blocks of code. We can then use that to generate the IL code. So what I'm going to do is create a new class with a static method for generating the code, just to keep it separate. So we call it something like IL generator dot emit. And I'm not too sure what arguments we're going to use, so we're just going to take in the same ones as we took in for the C# version for the moment. And also, I think it might be useful to know in the future whether in release or debug mode. Let's create a new class. And we'll automatically generate the method. Okay, so before we go any further, we need to import our NuGet package for Cecil. Okay, so we're going to look at importing types to begin with, and the first type we need to import is system.console. So we need to give it the path to the DLL which contains that. So obviously different versions of the .NET Core runtime will have a different path, but for the moment I'll just take the one out of my notes which I was using earlier, because I'm currently using .NET Core 3.1. So later on we'll change this, so this is actually passed in as an argument when we do .NET build, but for the moment we can hard code it. So once we've got the path to an assembly, we need to load it in so we can actually access the types within there. The way we do that is we use the assembly definition class. Read assembly, and we pass in the path of the assembly. And so that's giving us back a system.console assembly definition. An assembly definition is made up of modules, and then a module has types, and that's where we're going to have to look for our type. So what we're going to do is create a little helper method, because we want to find, the first type we want to find is system.console. Yes, we'll do that now. So let's do find type. So we're going to pass in system.console. So this is the assembly information, and then the name of the type we're looking for, which is in this case just system.console. So as we already said, definition is made up of modules, and then each module has got types, so you can do select many to flatten that list. and single or default, where the type's name. Okay, so what this should do is it should be looking at all types from all modules to see if we can find one with its full name as being system.console. If it fails to find one, we've got a problem. So we're just going to throw an exception because there's not much we can do. Otherwise, we're just going to return that type. And that type is of type definition. So we can set that there. Okay, so another type we might need from here is if we call, because we need to be using system.console.readKey. And what system.console read key returns is a console key info type. So we also need to find that. System.console key info. So I'm just going to put a breakpoint here and run the program just to make sure we've got the first bit correct. And then once we've found these two types, we can then start finding methods. And there's going to be 3 methods I think we need, which is write, or write character, read key, and write string. Okay, so that's working. So that's successfully found both of those types. So let's add a new method for finding a method now. So the first method we want to find is probably, should we have first read key. So the place we're looking for the method is on that type. And the name of the method we're looking for is read key. So similar to before, actually no, that's not quite right, it's we need to pass the type in. So on the type we can look for the methods. Same sort of idea before, single default. This time we only want the name of the method. If we took full name, that would include system.console on the front, which we don't want. And yep, we'll just do that for the moment, and we'll do the same sort of idea. And that will report an error if we can't find the method. And then finally we can return our method. And the method is of type method definition for the moment. We will change this later. Okay, let's make sure that works. So this might not work. Yes, and the reason it doesn't work is because there's different methods called read key, which take different number of arguments. So if we look at system.console.read key, you see there's actually an overload which takes in a boolean as well. And so there's 2 methods defined for this type, and so it doesn't know which one we want. So in this case, it's quite straightforward because we can just say the number of parameters is 0. We want the version which doesn't have any parameters. The next method we want is write line. So this version does have a parameter. Write line takes in a string. So we want to find the version of that method which has a single parameter, which is system.string. So we'll create a second version, which will be very similar to our first one. Only now we say we've got a single parameter and the type of that parameter, which is our first one, name is our parameter type. Yep. Okay, that's working. That's giving us our right. So we've got read key and write line. And the final one we want is write char. So that's just write, and that just takes in the system.char or character, and that's right. And we'll just make sure that's working as well. Okay, so that's working fine. So in the next part, when we set up our program, we actually have to import these methods into our program as well. So we need to change these methods slightly, but that's for the next part.